It's been a little while since I made my video announcing that I had decided to boycott Nintendo. I made it in the days following the announcement direct when all that icky stuff was coming out, and I was pretty mad. Since then, there's been quite a lot of discussion on this topic, and my little video kind of blew up. It's now the most viewed video on my channel, which is wild. There has been some really common sentiments surrounding all this that have troubled me to the point that I do feel I need to elaborate further on what I mean when I say boycott Nintendo. There have also, of course, been some developments causing many to ridicule the futility in resisting all of this, so let's address that first. Pre-orders have sold out in a good deal of the world, and the Switch 2 is on track to be incredibly successful. I'm not surprised. It's a new Nintendo console. I am surprised that a lot of people seem to think I was arrogant enough to believe my video would shut down a billion-dollar company. I'm not that naive. Nintendo will come out of this just fine. They were always going to. They're too big to fail. But a bit of bad PR is a good thing. And it's not over yet. They're not in the clear. It is important to note that the people pre-ordering these consoles have not traditionally been their core audience. Nintendo's demographic has always been families and casual gamers. They have traditionally targeted their products for mass appeal. Their demographic is not the people staying up to 4 a.m. refreshing their tab to secure their pre-order. They're the people who give their kid Mario is missing for Christmas and wonder why they look disappointed. They're the people buying a Switch for Animal Crossing because it's COVID and they don't want to be the weird one who doesn't get all the memes about the owl man. And when you don't live and breathe video games, the question of whether or not they are worth the money becomes a lot easier to answer. Would Animal Crossing have been the system seller it was if it and the Switch were more expensive? I think probably not, especially not in the middle of a pandemic and the economy isn't looking much better now. People are still blaming US tariffs, despite Nintendo themselves coming forward to say, no, it's not tariffs. It's not tariffs. I don't know how clearly I have to spell it out. The increased taxation of imported goods into America shouldn't really affect the taxation of imported goods in other countries, right? It certainly shouldn't affect digital games. There is nothing being imported. There are no tariffs on digital goods, even in America. Why are we talking about this? It shouldn't come as a surprise that the vast majority of people in the world don't live in America. Trump has obviously made an impact on the world economy, but tariffs don't rise between Japan and other countries in the world. The tariffs specifically only affect America and the imported goods Americans pay for, not the ones I pay for. I live elsewhere. This is not to undermine the economic impact. Prices of PlayStation 5s were increased in several countries, including mine, recently. I personally think we're seeing, with this Sony price increase, the first signs of them following in Nintendo's footsteps, because they've seen the world blame Trump for Nintendo's prices and found themselves a pretty handy scapegoat. I'm not endorsing Trump's tariffs, or Trump himself at all when I say it's not him. I didn't vote for him. Because I couldn't have, I don't live in your country, but I wouldn't have even if I was able to. It's just not him. Nintendo has said so. Wouldn't it have been much more convenient for them to blame him like Sony has? It would take a bit of the heat off, wouldn't you think? And the important thing that people seem to forget with all of this is that Trump walked back the majority of the tariff increases. It's still not great, but it's certainly not bad enough to warrant major international price increases on hardware. So it's not tariffs. Stop blaming your president. Blame Nintendo. It is them. Those prices were set long ago. They had to let stores know for pre-orders worldwide. They had to write copy to publicize it. That stuff takes time. They weren't sitting on their hands on the night of the direct announcement of their new console thinking, what should we charge for our video games? It took a lot of deliberating over a long period of time because it was a risky move. And it's not fucking inflation. Nintendo hasn't mentioned inflation at all. That's purely from the people defending them. They could have blamed inflation. Again, it's proven a handy excuse, and it seems a lot of people would have eaten that up. But Lord Bowser himself has said the increase in price is not due to inflation, but due to variable pricing. It is the argument that their games are so good that they should charge more for them. And a lot of people share this sentiment. Nintendo games are often very good, but sometimes their games are not that good. Or sometimes they're just re-releases of games that were finished years ago and have already recouped their production costs and then some. If pricing is set by the time and resources required to make these games, or whatever metric Nintendo decides is useful in pricing, why are these games priced the same? There is an obvious bias in companies charging what they think their product is worth rather than an industry standard. You would never see Nintendo saying, hey, actually, this one didn't turn out as good as we thought it would be. You guys can pay less. They have a vested interest in people paying more. And it's subjective. They might think a game has thousands of potential hours of playtime, but I might play it for an afternoon and decide it's not for me. They don't know how much time I'm going to invest in a game like Mario Kart World. They can't account for that in pricing. It's purely hypothetical. I've seen a lot of people say things like, video games are a luxury product. Why are you complaining that they cost money? Well, because Nintendo hasn't always been a luxury brand. And I say luxury brand, I'm not talking about products that are luxuries. Most things in life are luxuries. If it doesn't feed you, give you shelter, or keep you hydrated, it's a luxury. If you use double-ply toilet paper, it's a luxury. Any toilet paper is a luxury. If you're poor, why don't you just use a hose and wipe with your hand? A luxury item doesn't need to be expensive. It's just something you don't necessarily need. You don't need most things. Wanting something is not the same as equating it to be a basic human right. By boycotting Nintendo, I'm not calling for the government to implement a socialized system for owning video games. Nintendo has a right to charge more money for their products, but I have the right to protest the direction the company has taken because they haven't always been this way. There has been a change in the way they sell their products, and that's about more than a price increase. It's about their business strategies. This isn't sudden. It's been building for a good deal of time, but it is now worse than it's ever been, which is why I say no more. A luxury brand is one that has developed a certain amount of prestige that is as much to do with quality as it is with price. It is a brand that showcases that it is high-end by pricing on the higher end. To market for mass appeal is to want a Nintendo in every home. That is not the concern of the luxury brand. The luxury brand wants a Nintendo only in the homes that have a lot of money. The luxury brand wants Nintendo to be a prestige item, which is why it is so worrying when Bowser himself says, if you can't afford the Switch 2, don't buy it. That is not how Nintendo has done things in the past. Nintendo has always wanted you to buy it. This is a change in strategy, and it's worrying. To emphasize this, let's stop talking about video games as products for a second and start talking about them as art, because that is, for me, the crux of all of this. There are no other artistic mediums that are this expensive for an audience member. To buy a console or a PC good enough to run modern games, it's a massive commitment. With other mediums, it's easier now more than ever. When I was a kid, you can go to the DVD store and rent 7 movies a week for around $10. And now you can watch unlimited movies for about that price a month. And there's some real problems with that subscription model. Cinemas are kind of in trouble, and the death of physical media is just as pertinent in film as it is in games. But if you like a movie that you saw on Netflix, you can still buy a Blu-ray or a DVD and own it. You can cancel that Netflix account and watch that movie as many times as you want. And it isn't more or less expensive depending on which company's hardware you're using it on. Video games are obviously more complicated because they have more content than a movie does. Some games last for thousands of hours, and they also take longer to make. It makes sense that they are more expensive than movies, but they are a lot more expensive, and they require very expensive hardware. For that reason, video games have lent into this subscription-based model, and I think that's a good thing. It makes more sense to pay a small fee monthly for as many games as you want than only being able to afford a couple a year, and that makes sense for both company and consumer. The business gets a steady stream of income with customers invested in their product, and because they are invested, it's more likely that they will buy those big AAA games when they release because the hobby has become part of their lifestyle. It's proven to be reliably profitable, and that's why every media industry does this, and the amount of streaming services creates pressure for companies to offer more quantity or quality to stay competitive. That's why Nintendo's failure to meet that industry standard is so frustrating. It would be nothing but beneficial for Nintendo to charge more for their monthly fee but offer the same quality and quantity of content as their competition. The reason they don't is because it dilutes the value of their games to offer them as part of a subscription model. It's why they re-release games with the same price as modern games, and it's why their games never go on sale. It is this same thinking that has led them to believe it's okay for them to charge more than their competition, and that video games with the Nintendo brand are more valuable than any others. It is luxury branding. There are media companies that are luxury brands, but art itself as a luxury brand is unusual, especially when there is an industry standard in how much it costs. Movies aren't priced in the cinema by how good the company who made them thinks it is. That's why the decision for Nintendo to tell consumers if you can't afford the Switch 2, don't buy it, is very scary. Not just for consumers, but for artists. Artists want people to experience their art. Artists want their games to be played, not treated as a status symbol, especially when they are primarily designed for young people. Kids don't care about luxury. They don't care about value. They want to jump on Goombas' heads. Parents also don't care about Nintendo games as luxury items because they're not the ones playing them. That's why these decisions are so baffling. It is important to point out that there are pretty shitty business practices all around in this industry. A lot of people called into question why I wasn't boycotting Sony or Microsoft when they're really awful too. My decision to boycott Nintendo isn't an open endorsement to those other companies. Saying Nintendo is bad is not the same as saying Ubisoft is good, or that Nintendo products aren't worth the money but unfinished buggy cash grabs are. The reason why I'm boycotting Nintendo instead of Sony or Microsoft is not because they have my big thumbs up, it's because I think Nintendo is worse. The decision for Sony and Microsoft to increase their prices was pretty labored. It took decades to finally make it, and it hasn't taken long for Nintendo to do it again, and it's not justified. Because they could have just met Microsoft and Sony's price increase and made a ton more money than they already were, which is a fucking ton of money. Nintendo has traditionally been seen as the family-friendly console option, which is light on cost to justify the technical limitations of their hardware. There are exceptions, but this has been the strategy for a good long while. And even though they've pushed the hardware a lot this generation, it's still not more powerful than the competition. 120 frames per second is cool, but reports are that isn't the case for all games, and a good deal of games will perform worse than on other platforms that cost less. The specs are closer in power than they have been for a long time, but not enough to justify the decision to be more expensive. I downloaded a game on Steam the other day that I bought in 2008. That's how this should be done. Nintendo aren't selling games, they're renting them to you for about 7 or 8 years, and then you need to buy them again. And sometimes you can't buy them again. They take away the option. Many people have said that it is a terrible argument to say that Nintendo bad 'cause keycards, because Sony and Microsoft have both sold games that require digital downloads on their physical games to play them. Yes, but Nintendo is worse. In the last video I made about all this, I said that it had only been announced that Street Fighter and Bravely Default were guilty of this. It turns out it's likely that all third-party games will be keycards. So that's why I say boycott Nintendo instead of any other companies, because Nintendo are worse. But none of this matters, right? Pre-orders have sold out, The Switch 2 is going gangbusters. Does this all mean the boycott has failed? Well, let's talk about what a boycott is and what it isn't. And this is something I really should have done in the last video about all this. And it's the main reason I set out to make this one, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. A boycott is simply the refusal to buy goods or services from a company as an act of protest. I'm not giving them money because I don't like what they're doing. That's it. I'm just not buying their stuff. I got a lot of people saying, what will you do if the boycott fails? Will you buy a Switch 2? That's not how this works. If you decide to become a vegetarian because you don't like factory farming, you don't change your mind just because people won't stop eating hamburgers. That's fucking ridiculous. That's not what a boycott is. A boycott isn't getting mad that you can't afford something. It's an act of protest. It's not some strategic bartering maneuver. It's simply a public expression of disapproval. Obviously, there is an intention behind it. I do want to send a message. I'd love it if Nintendo reversed some of their decisions, but that disapproval doesn't change to approval if they don't and people stop caring. The reason I was angry was not because I couldn't afford it. It's because I think people, not just me, people in the world who aren't me, because there are people who aren't me, and things affect people who aren't me just as much as they do me. Those people have to pay those same prices, and I think a good deal of those people don't have the privilege that I do. But again, I'm not naive. I don't think my personal decision to not buy Nintendo is going to hurt their bottom line. I'm happy that the video did well and a good deal of people agreed with me, and I'm glad Nintendo is, for the first time in a while, getting some proper heat. They deserve it. I don't think Nintendo will drop the price. That was never the goal, which is why I never said that. The goal was and is to not give them money. That's it. And if you decide to do the same, then I think that's great. And if that snowballs to a point that Nintendo becomes sensitive about their public perception and starts to course correct, great. But if they don't, I'm not just going to kick rocks and buy a Switch 2. So where do we go from here? I've decided not to buy Nintendo. What does that mean for me as a person who talks about video games on the internet? Well, it's complicated because I'm a fairly new channel and I don't really make any one sort of video. These videos about this Nintendo situation are, funnily enough, the only videos on my channel that are about Nintendo specifically, so I imagine a lot of people out there will think me saying I'm going to boycott Nintendo is kind of like saying I'm going to boycott turtleneck sweaters. You're not here for sweater content. I get it. But since branching out from Elden Ring, I've really just started talking about whatever it is that I'm playing. And if I'm not buying Nintendo, I'm not playing Nintendo, or at least, I mean, I could. But even if I buy Metroid Prime 4 secondhand from a guy in an alley and no money touches Nintendo's hands, I would potentially still be raving about a game I love and convincing other people to buy it. And that kind of undercuts the whole point of this. I'm just going to keep talking about games I'm playing, and that's probably not going to be Nintendo, even if I don't pay for it. And that's tough for someone making YouTube videos about video games. Nintendo makes some big games, and videos about them draw big viewership. It's tough for someone that likes playing video games because they're often very good. But what's the use in complaining about all this if at the end of the day you shrug and hand over your wallet? And that's what angers me most about all of this recent business, because I saw this angry swarm of videos complaining about Nintendo, and then within the span of a couple days, people were showing off their pre-order receipts. That's what Nintendo is banking on. That's keeping up with the Joneses. They want you to get one regardless of the cost because you don't want to be the person without one. Don't buy into it. It's fine to not have one. So when does it end? If I don't expect Nintendo to drop the price, and I don't expect the boycott to win, what happens? What would it take for me to buy a Switch 2? I don't know. I can't give you that answer. I can't conceive right now what that would look like. In the same way, before all this, I wouldn't have been able to conceive what it would take for me to boycott them. I don't know. But it would be significant. I'm not going to take the next mildly positive news as the go-ahead to switch it up. It needs to be a genuine course correct on business strategy and not just one good deal. What that looks like, I can't tell you. But I'll tell you what wouldn't convince me to buy a Switch 2. Other people buying it. Pre-orders selling out won't make me buy a Switch 2, and Nintendo making a whole bunch of money isn't going to convince me to give them mine. That's not how this works. That's not what a boycott is. If you do agree with me, and you also want to boycott Nintendo, stay strong. There's a lot out there to play. I've been playing this game on Steam that I paid less than $10 for. It's great. A Monsters Expedition, highly recommended. It's bursting with content, stacked with charm. It's cheap, and in 20 years, I can download it even if I've gotten a new computer. Nintendo games are often really good, but they aren't the only ones making great games. They don't need your money, but there are a lot of smaller companies that do. So support them. And speaking of support, thank you, patrons. So sorry I didn't thank you in the last couple videos. I was a little mad and it didn't really fit the tone of the video. Thank you to IRANDMS, Bender, Wastoid, Blemkin, and a very special thank you to Leiko choking on Razors, Ratini, and Banana Mate, as well as all the lovely people you see here. If you want to support the channel and have your name here or said with my mouth, go check out the Patreon. I make original content there. I often do commentaries or Q&As with my community for my video essays. I'm also going to start dropping some mini reviews up there. I've got one on Wonder Stop, which should be dropping sometime next week, and I'm probably going to do one on a Monsters Expedition as well as soon as I finish it. It's massive. I have said, I think a couple times now, that I wouldn't be making any more videos about this situation. Sorry for all the people sick of me talking about it. I did feel it necessary to classify what this boycott means for this channel, and this was a pretty good way to do it. Future videos are going to be more in line with what I usually do. I've got an essay coming soon about story in puzzle games. That's going to be about Blueprints, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and The Witness, so that's your warning to play them before you get spoiled. I've also got a long gestating video about genre featuring the Yakuza games and many more. And of course, I have the Elden Ring DLC guide coming. I know it's taken a while. The game is pretty hard, it turns out. It's coming. I'd say I'm about halfway through. Thanks for sticking to the end. Do the like and subscribe thing if you want to and you want to see more of this stuff. Leave a comment and tell me what non-Nintendo game you're most excited to play next. I'm going to play Clair Obscura as soon as I catch up on Expeditions 1 through 32. Be well, and please, please, have a great day.
He's here for you, know the words, join in too. Don't you wanna clap, take the groove, monkey rap. Donkey,